So here we are again, Reburned, 6th episode. After some time now, we have all been busy, I think, and after the summer of 2022. And today, this beautiful Saturday morning, I have the great pleasure to host one of the most respected wildfire professionals in the world, I must say. And in Twitter, a very active member in wildfire community, Mr. Rob Gazzard from the Forest Commission and Wildfire Advisor.
Thank you very much indeed, and thank you very much for these series of presentations. They've been absolutely fascinating to hear colleagues' thoughts and ideas about it. So thank you very much for organising this. It's a great initiative, and like many colleagues, thank you for doing this. I wouldn't say I'm the best, but I'm certainly learning and still learning about wildfire, and it's an absolute pleasure to have the opportunity to chat to you about it today.
Thank you. We are all learning in this wildfire arena, I think. We're learning every day. You can never know enough, and as we share with the previous episodes with the other colleagues, the fire is changing. It's so dynamic. All the data we have in place are quite dynamic, and they are changing. So the better communication we have amongst us, the better will be the future for everyone. But please, Rob, feel free to tell us a bit more about you, so the people that are watching us right now know a little bit more about you.
That's very kind. Thank you very much. I'm a forester by trade. I've been a forester since the early 90s, so plus 25 years of doing that. Chartered surveyor as well and chartered forester. I first got into wildfire back in '99. My first fire on my estate. I used to be working for the Ministry of Defence as a head forester, and we had this big wildfire. And what's this thing that's happening? Getting everyone very excited. So I got very much involved into that. And I really sparked my curiosity, to use a pun at the end of the day. I then developed my skills. I moved to Forestry Commission, and I became a retained firefighter for about 7 years, a level 1 commander by the end of it, managing several pumps, which was great fun, and learned lots there, and great respect for our fire rescue service colleagues from that period. My wildfire had been developing. I'd been doing courses abroad. I went to Port Costas to do the advanced burn course over there, which was fantastic fun, and really got to love and learn with some great friends in Port Costa Foundation in Catalonia. Then I kind of carried on that journey. I got asked by the Chief Fire Officer of Hampshire at the time, Dave Carey, to go to Oregon, the first ever exchange, and to be a retained firefighter, to be asked, that was a real privilege. So we did several weeks over there, learning about how in Oregon they look at wildfires and other challenges. And then I carried on that journey, I suppose, with colleagues over on Trex, did a training exchange, a fantastic organisation in America, Nature Conservation, down again in Oregon, a bit further down in Ashland, leading a module, and then ended up leading the planning section in that process. Carried that journey on with Trex, then went to California with my colleague Andy Elliott, and Andy and I have had this relationship for a very long time, where we've been going abroad together and doing things like Trexes or doing exchanges with CAL FIRE. Did a few weeks with CAL FIRE on the lead up to the 2017 fires, which was, we were in red flag when we arrived and things were getting quite serious. And just after we left, the Napa Valley went, which was, and we'd been out in Napa on various different task forces or initial attack teams, learning the hard way about how things are done in extreme environments. I then carried on to do another Trex, pilot Trex up in Eugene in Oregon, and then visit our colleagues back again at Sisters, Mount Sherman fire station, where we'd been back in 2015. So it was great to catch up with everybody, but things are becoming very, very serious out there. You're seeing the extreme fire behaviour, which we saw briefly in July this year in the UK. I've been part of the EU Civil Protection Mechanism, but Andy and I were the only two members of that from the UK from a wildfire point of view. 2 deployments in Brussels at the European Emergency Control Centre. Fantastic colleagues there. Really enjoyed my weeks over there, working with colleagues and learning about the EU CPM. And the deployment to Croatia as a part of the training exercises over there, working with 11 modules as operations commander, kind of theoretically working through the challenges that we were having a big wildfire deployment, which is what they're doing now. So I learned that process. And the privilege to be the UK's first ever official deployment for Wildfire in 2018 to Greece. A very humbling experience working with the Hellenic Fire Corps, a wonderful group of people, covering the Kinetia and the Mati fires and providing a report back to the Hellenic Fire Corps on behalf of the Foreign Common Office at the time, about what had happened over there, and hopefully that's helping build resilience in Greece. A lovely bunch of people, obviously very sad and tragic what happened, but privileged to be asked to go over and do that work.
Wow, I can say only wow, with such a rich portfolio. You've traveled the world and you have met so many people and so many professionals from every region, from US down to Europe, Southern Europe, Western Europe. So you've seen so much. What has captured your attention from all of your trips across the world? What has stayed in your mind?
I suppose after all these years of working around Europe and America and other places, and having that privilege to do that, it's been an honour to be asked to do those things. It's about people. The whole issues around people, and the brotherhoods and sisterhoods of fire that we work within and land management are so closely intertwined. These are really lovely people. We've got some great people in the UK, in the fire service and in the land management sector, all pulling in the right direction. And it's about people at the end of the day. The UK, if I was to focus down to it, it's a people problem. Our land management is man-made, largely. All our habitats are usually man-made. Our ignition sources are man-made, either deliberate or accidental. The only natural part of it is the phenomenon of wildfire, which has been around for 450 million years. And to me, it's a people issue, wildfire. If we want to make the change, then we have the capacity to do that, certainly in the UK. That challenge is different in other parts of the world. It is probably more natural in some ways. How do we deal with large areas of land which aren't being managed? But certainly in the UK, it's a human problem. We need to work with that. That's one of our biggest challenges. So it's great that we've got excellent people looking at fire science and developing our understanding, because there is large gaps about that. And you've got some excellent presenters already talking about those issues. But the human dimension is the critical bit. And that's actually the theme of the Belfast conference this year for wildfire in November. So that's the bit that's been fascinating me, if I'm brutally honest. And having this conversation is part of that people relationship again. So yeah, that's the big thing.
Absolutely, absolutely. You know, it's the common thing that it's a common narrative that we spoke, we discussed with the previous speakers, people, about engaging people. Professor Boustras from Cyprus has really emphasized this, and this has been in our conversations for the last few years now, that we need to engage people and we need to understand people more. And this is where the scientists and the research is coming along with the fire professionals and the practitioners. So I absolutely agree that we need to get along the communities and the people, further engage and further understanding them, and build up this resilience from the communities up. So from all the places that you have traveled across the world, which population, which community was the most resilient one, and which, or have a better understanding and was better prepared to counter the wildfires?
I think one of the things that stood out to me over the years is I did a very pleasure to do a sabbatical down in or study period down in Australia, particularly southern Australian states, and I was really impressed with how they were meeting that challenge. There are big challenges over there, and they're still building that up. But I think it was trying to move the community away from being victims to actually being part of the solution, whether they were part of the agricultural community, whether they were in an urban or suburban community. I think they have a real strong passion over there for engaging people and trying to get them to be maybe the first level of our response. If you can evacuate quick and remove the life risk, that is such a critical thing. So the work that they're doing over there, I think, is really, really impressive. And the same, I think, I suppose, with our colleagues, the National Fire Protection Agency. Association, my apologies. They're doing some great work with firewires and fire adapted communities in California and across the United States, and again making the community resilient. I think we're really focused on what we do as land managers or what we do as firefighters, but one of our biggest problems is when we get to that rural urban interface, as we call it in the UK. If we can remove the human risk element out of it, we can make so many more decisions. And if we can empower our local communities, to make their local areas more resilient to fire in the first instance before the fire even begins. So we saw that challenge in London this year and in Norfolk, particularly in Norfolk this year, in the east of England. Then we're on the right path. And if we can get those communities to start doing that prevention, and then if we do have a challenge, that they can respond effectively and efficiently, then I think our life is going to become a bit easier. And obviously the thing we are all working towards is not having a loss of life in the UK. And we're all very focused on that. The fire service, my colleagues who I work with, Dave Swallow, Paul Headley, Rob Stacey, Steve Gibson, all those colleagues in the fire service, they are focused on that one thing, and so are we as land managers, and that's what we're trying to prevent, working very hard and passionately towards. I think that's probably what drives us. Again, it's a human instinct, isn't it? And I think all of your colleagues you've spoken to had tragedies, and that's marked them, and they want to avoid that. So yeah, I think Australia was very good. What's happening in America is really, really good. And those programs that they're putting together are really worthwhile. They're the soft bit, and prevention's a difficult animal, as you'll know. You never get any value for the prevention you cause. You never know what you've stopped. It's a very difficult thing to measure, particularly politically at the end of the day. And I think we as professionals have to keep championing that prevention method and that preparedness that our communities need. And that was certainly my response back from Greece. I looked at what we'd seen over there and what we'd examined, and preparedness and prevention has to be built into the community. We need to let go of some of the power we have and share that power with other people, because people are very passionate about these things, and they do get. I had a call just a few days ago with some homeowners in an area which had a large wildfire here in the south of England, very, very passionate about protecting their communities. And I respect them for coming forward and doing that. So, yeah, that's the message there, I suppose.
Yeah, you have opened so many dialogues in your narrative just there, Rob. And obviously, let's start from this summer, 2022. So you have a very, very hot summer. We have seen images that we were not expecting. At least I was not expecting to see those images such early in the day, to be honest. That fire in the highway, in the motorway, that we saw some aggressive fires this summer.
Yeah.
Were you on the ground, on the fire ground at the moment? Were you or near the area?
My job is very much now national in role. So my job is to kind of monitor and track these things and prepare my organisation, the Forestry Commission, for it. Forestry Commission has got three parts: the regulatory body who I work for. We're one of the largest land managers in Forestry England, so we have a large portfolio, and also then we have a research body. So my job is to make our organisation resilient, but I also work with DEFRA colleagues, Natural England, National Parks, to make sure that they're informed and aware of what's happening as well. And we wrote about these fires back in 2016 in a paper to the Royal Society. I'm very privileged to work with Jonathan Aylan and Julia McMorrow, who are two of our mentors. They really got us going down the research road, and they're great people. We wrote about this in 2016 in our Royal Society paper, and it was kind of sad that it's come so early. The rural urban interface fires that were happening, we were writing about, and we were talking about in an England policy context. And we're now there. Where we thought we had some time. I think Dave Swallow mentioned this, and he's right to do so. We thought we had a bit of time. We are now there now. So we've really got to step up. And my work now, particularly as I've been now seconded into DEFRA, the Department for Environment and Rural Affairs, is to Food and Rural Affairs, is to look at adaptation. Right, what we're doing now is mitigation. That's what we've been doing for many decades. We need now to think completely differently. This is where adaptation kicks in. So we're working on the National Adaptation Programme. We're working on the actions that wildfire needs to do, not just across land management, things like forestry or peatlands, where DEFRA is very much so, but across government, looking at infrastructure, we're looking at industry, we're looking at businesses, we're looking at health and well-being, we're looking at that international dimension, because wildfire, as we know, global thing, how does that affect our country and other countries? These things are all interrelated. And then the other thing that we saw this year was the interdependency, and it's a great example of it. We talked about interdependency in the National Adaptation Programme, about how wildfire sits alongside and is affected by storms and by drought, by high winds, by a whole range of other things, but they're all interrelated. And we saw Storm Arwen came through beginning of the year, December last year. Lots of trees blown over in the north of England. Well, actually, those trees were then on fire in Northumberland, and I had big credit to my colleagues in Forestry England and also Northumberland Fire and Rescue Service for dealing with very tricky fires. Trees that are blown over, not standing up, all over the place. Now they're on fire because the vertical alignment's been completely changed, and we had some very intense forest fires. So here we got storm damage and wildfire now coming together during a period of drought, during high winds, and all other factors coming together. Really tricky situations. So we're now seeing the interdependencies and why adaptation means we've got to do things differently. And it goes back to the people thing. How do we help our colleagues who have been so embedded in some ways of thinking about land management or in maybe wildfire fighting? How do we get them now to say, well, that's come and gone now. We've got to approach this a complete different way. The whole of your career that you've been going down has changed. We've got to now change that. So we've got to help, and it's really important that we do this. We help colleagues to have that mindset change. Give them the tools that they need and use the subtle tools and processes to help them make that change, because they've still got huge amounts of value and experience we can build upon, but we're going to go off on a different journey in the future. There's lots to do here.
Mm-hmm.
Lots to unpick.
Yeah.
Lots to unpick, and in essence, we are moving to that model. We kind of look at ourselves somewhere in the Loire Valley in France. That's where the UK is going to be, 2040s, 2060s. We're already taking our tree kind of provenance for those areas. Those are the trees that we're going to be growing now for the future, because that's the challenge of climate change and the change in latitude. So those are the kind of things we've got to adopt. We've got to look across the world for our solutions at the end of the day. I think you're on mute there. A doggy. Still on mute, I can't hear you. Okay, you're on mute. I can't hear you.
Let's go again.
Sorry.
Can you
That's
hear me?
better. There you go. Yes. That's it.
Okay.
You've cut and paste that bit there.
So weird. So I will go again. Yeah. So with your great example, you really brought things into context with the storm and how the storm has affected the wildfire in the immediate aftermath. So it's a really, really great example, and it really needs what you said about helping colleagues changing the mindset into a more holistic approach with regards to wildfires, and how we actually, there is no should right now. It's a must that we must adapt to this new reality, this new era of wildfires. The seasons, the age that we get off the fire appliances and we grab a hose and we fire a wheel, that era it has already gone. So wildfires have moved forward us, and will get us into trouble if we don't adapt to this new reality. So how is the UK community's response to the latest occurrences, the latest summer in the UK? So you have the big wildfires. You were on the ground, so I'm sure you have spoken with some community members, or you have discussed the reaction of the communities to the wildfires. How are the UK people prepared to that?
So we had our England Wildfire Forum meeting yesterday, so it was great to actually hear from colleagues professionally about these challenges that they've had, and I've been chatting actually to some fire rescue services and land managers who were affected this year. I think a lot of people were caught off guard because they don't think it's going to be them. It's, if you go back to Teague's manual, it's a brilliant book. Teague, I love his book, and he wrote down everything so clearly.
What book is that?
It's an old fire marshal. He wrote down all of his faults in a fantastic book. And one of the things he discusses is the human denial process. It's like, well, it isn't going to happen here. And if it does happen, it isn't going to happen again. And when it does happen again, it's like, well, I'm not going to be affected. I mean, you are affected. Do you know, I mean, these stages of denial that human beings go to block out these challenges. It's endemic in how human beings work. And he challenges that and says, well, now you've got to be accepting of this process. And there's some other very good writers who look at these kind of issues as well from a people point of view. We are human beings. We use these various tools to manage our lives, and sometimes they can be difficult and cause challenges to us. And I think we've gone through that phase this year. It's like it now has happened to you. You've now got to deal with it, whether that's a land manager or a fire and rescue service. And that's been the thing that's kind of hit me the most. All the kind of, oh, it's not going to happen. That's gone now. We've got to start dealing with this problem. And I'd like to take off my hat to colleagues in Wales, South Wales Fire and Rescue Service, and NRW, National Resources Wales. They're doing some excellent work there on this particular issue. Our colleagues in Northern Ireland, the Northern Ireland Environment Agency and Forest Service, as well as Northern Ireland Fire and Rescue Service, again, got some really coherent programmes. And of course, our colleagues in Scotland, the Scottish Fire and Rescue Service, and the various land management agencies over there. They're getting their headphones. Obviously, they've had some large fires in Scotland on the run of 2018, 2019. So they are on that journey. We are beginning that journey now in England. And I'm hopeful for the future because we've got some excellent people here. We've got some excellent research bodies. Nick Catteridge, Gareth Clay, Claire Belcher, and Stefan Dorr, of course, at the end of the day, Tom Smith. Some great people, some great institutions. Guillermo, give me a ring. We could forget Guillermo Rain.
He's a good
Rory Haddon up at Edinburgh. I mean, there's lots of people here with professionalism from around the world. I mean, the UK exports its knowledge around the world. We're working in all different parts of the world, gathering information. The weakest bit actually is the UK bit, which is ironically enough because they're all based here. But we've got this towards the UK FDRS project, which is beginning to start looking at this problem very holistically. We're looking, obviously, at developing a fire danger rating system, but obviously you have to look at things like risk maps, right? So let's start engaging with the land management sector, looking at infrastructure, let's looking at the human element to all these kind of things. How can we roll this out as a national risk map at the future? These are all really important products at the end of the day, and we're at the very early stages of understanding the science behind it. Part of my job now is to move that from science into a product in terms of having policy instruments. And taking my practical experience, getting my hands dirty and covered in soot from all around the world or in the UK, and going, right, what is actually do we need? What's the practical things, tools that we need to move forward at the end of the day, so that this adaptation challenge can be met? And I'm going to have to engage more widely with fire behaviour, social scientists to start saying, well, how do we start connecting with people? And effectively, we've got some excellent social scientists over here, because that human element is going to be the critical bit in buying into these issues at all different levels.
Yeah, and I'm quite certain that the UK will adapt. You have already started and you are there. You're not at the start. I think you are heading with full force. You have created people like yourself and so many others that you're so passionate about it, and you're really bringing things into action. Yes, sometimes we need to get our hands dirty and we need to get into it, and it's all about forming the correct questions of what we need, how can we do that, what is the why. The why, obviously, you have answered us before, which is the protection of the human life, and that's a huge why for every single person out there. The protection of human life, it's the pinnacle of everyone. So I absolutely agree with you, and connecting with the social scientists will give you the understanding and the perspective that you need to get, and also train the firefighters, the people on the ground, of that social, that societal perspective for them to understand the communities and how can the operational crews, the scientific community, and the communities can all work together towards the goal, which the goal is actually prevent fires from starting at the beginning, and also understand how can we live with fire, because it's not going anywhere. Fires are not going anywhere. They're getting more intense.
Exactly.
And there are so many projects running along in Europe right now, scientific projects that like PyroLife or Fire EU Risk, great projects that their message is how can we live with fire. And I'm sure when you've been to Pau Casa Foundation, we spoke with our amazing colleagues down there in Catalonia with Mark Castellano, which one of the greatest gurus in wildfires across the world, with Juan Camano, a good friend and very, very, very excellent wildfire professional. I'm sure that you have discussed these things in very great depth. Yeah.
Yeah, and great to speak to Juan just a few days ago, catching up. We've known each other a very long time now, and it's been a pleasure and a privilege. Mark, as you say, our inspiration comes from Mark, and his humility. When he doesn't know something, he'll tell you, and that's a great thing in the human beings. I mean, I always
so noble. He's a noble man.
I warm to people who turn around and say, "I don't know that bit," because there's nothing worse than someone thinking that they know something, and you find out that that's not the case. And Catalana Stoof, I think, has been done a great Life and Power Life project. I mean, it's a great initiative. We've been training some of her students recently. We've been actively involved in that program. But to bring things like water management and fire, I mean, that's been a real bit of genius at the end of the day, because really, why do we need to reinvent systems for wildfire when we've already got them for flooding? Very well established in the UK. Can we not use those systems and processes to our advantage from a fire point of view? The language is understood, the processes, the policies, the work on the ground is understood. Well, let's see what wildfire can bring to that using those models. I think it's a very clever and intelligent way, a very Dutch way, but hey, the Dutch are leaders in those particular worlds, and why not go down that route? Yeah, I mean, my friend Paco, excellent work in Spain as well. I mean, there's so many colleagues out there who you can draw inspiration and knowledge from, and they've been giving out information really freely. So it's a great thing that people are not holding on to power; they're willing to share it. Paul Costa, a great example of that at the end of the day, and that's where we need to be. We can't solve this problem on our own, and we are still learning so much in the UK. We're only baby toddler steps as we're moving forward. Hopefully we'll get forward to proper walking and maybe a sprint later on, but we'll see how we get on.
And also Europe, it's behind the US. Like my first interview with Jim Whittington, he said that you are right now a little bit before that. So brace for impact. What he said is, let's say if I collectivize this, he said just brace for impact.
Yeah,
this is what he said. So, so we need to step ahead and learn from each other, learn from others like US and of course Australia. There have been some disastrous wildfires out there, and yes, we start exchanging information. Hence the creation of this podcast, because we have all these great voices that we need to amplify. And if we get this information outside, out there, and we get people into this mindset, even if we can trigger a mindset, if we can trigger a little spark in people's minds to start research what else is out there, I'm sure those that are unwilling to change, they will be forced to change, or will be inspired to change.
And I think about my colleague Peter Moore, who was in the FAO looking at this issue, and I think we also have to remember that obviously in our developed world, we have a duty and responsibility to the developing world to transfer our knowledge to other countries who have equal problems. We don't hear very much about them, but they have equal, maybe more devastating problems. And how do we reach out to those countries to pass on what we've learned to them so that they can build their resilience adaptation as well? So that's why I was inspired by Peter and his work there when he was working for FAO. I suppose leads us on to the training stuff that we've been doing in the UK. We've been trying to take all these amazing things that we've been learning across the world. Andy Elliott, who's co-wrote and wrote some of the most important modules. It's 40 years experience in the fire service and working, and now as a senior lecturer at senior researcher at Exeter, and a wildfire TACAD as well to boot, and an active one as well. We've tried to take all that experience and knowledge we've got and bring it into 4 modules, to 3 hours of online training per module, and then the workshop element where we actually physically do things at the end of the day, and then get that out to our land managers so we can upskill them so that they can be ready to adapt to these challenges. And sometimes we're challenging the way that they've done things, and sometimes we're learning a lot back from them as well. It's been a really interesting and fascinating two-way process.
So,
it's great.
Sorry for interrupting. How can someone enroll on these courses?
Oh yeah, so we basically, what happened is that at DEFRA, the Department for Food, Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, were changing the regulations around prescribed burning in deep peats, and there's you got 4 reasons why you need a license, and one of them's for doing to get a license to burn on deep peats because it's prohibited otherwise. One of those is wildfire prevention, and we said, well, that's great. We've been working with DEFRA and developing the regulations, and we're saying, why don't we also train people? Great that we're limiting something and managing it, because deep peats are really important as our biggest carbon stores in the UK. So we need to manage them and be careful of them. But why don't we train people? Why don't we upskill people so that their burning practice can improve and we can build resilience? And they went, this great idea. And hats off to Lee Lyons and the team and the soils team in DEFRA, who said, look, here's some money, go off and build us a course in 6 months. Nice. So we built them 4 courses. They're LANTRA accredited. LANTRA is our land use skills body, which manages our training over here. It's the peer of Skills for Justice in the fire service. And we developed these 4 courses. The first one was a foundation course, a bit like the journey we'd been in America. The training in America was great. I mean, everyone has exactly the same training, whether you're a federal firefighter, a state firefighter, whether you're a land manager or a civilian, you all have exactly the same training. You're on the same training path. We really love that concept because you can see the interoperability. Everyone can come together and work together. It's a brilliant concept.
Across the nation, yeah.
Across the nation, yeah. I mean, and they obviously Australia and New Zealand and South Africa appeared to that, to Canada. So everyone's now linked up. They're all very, very similar. There are subtle differences, but they can work together. Interoperability across the world. I mean, that's amazing, isn't it?
Absolutely.
And so we like the concept of that. We did a foundation course where you learn the basics. So you're like a mod A. You can ride the pump, for want of a better word. You can go on the fire ground and be safe. The second course is vegetation fire operator, and that's basically wildfire suppression or prescribed fire ignition. So we're giving the people the very basic skills to start their journey so they can be safe in those 2 factors. The next course is prescribed fire manager. It's how do you build a prescribed fire operations plan? Define the aims and objectives from your wildfire management plan and define your prescriptions. Now, this is common across the world. There's some really great examples. We're just learning and building from, we're not inventing anything new. And then the last one is the wildfire management plan, that's strategic management to build resilience, both mitigation and adaptation to wildfire in the land use, in that the site that you manage or the landscape that you're working in. And that came from a practice guide we wrote back in 2013 after the Swinley Forest fire, which probably really got me really into this kind of thing professionally full time. So we kind of peered them against other models internationally. We thought that was great, be good stuff to do. We've trained over 300 people now, and that's in over 500 modules. And that's across England and Wales, and then soon to be other parts of the UK. And also now to UK overseas territories. So we're looking to roll it out much wider because we think it's a useful standard. But what we've done, we thought that's just the beginning of the journey. We built what's called a competency-friendly task book, and anyone who's worked in the US knows their task book process, which you go through. And we've built it so that you can do this. Training is just the first step. Second step is then you consolidate that with a series of activities that are defined with your employer. Next, you move on to any experience gained that is valued, it's written down in your task book. And then an independent assessor will come along and step forward and go, right, okay, you've done all the right things. Now we believe you're competent. And then a bit like the fire service, you've got to then maintain that competency through things like CPD.
Yeah.
That's right. So that's step 5. And then step 6 is basically now we're kind of doing the update and refresher training. So we now have, that's going to hopefully be approved on the 21st of this month. And we put that to the Wildfire Training Group, again, chaired by DEFRA, fantastic leadership being shown there, but a wide range of partners, National Trust, got bodies there, Woodland Trust, we've got the National Gamekeepers Organisation, we've got the Moorland Association, a diverse range of thoughts and ideas, but coming together to address this challenge. Really, really impressive to see at the end of the day. And the National Fire Chiefs Council, so the fire's in there as well, along with Northumberland Fire Rescue Service, so great leadership being shown by them. And the idea being is now we have a framework for land managers. We've got future modules coming out, which we're working with international partners on and UK partners, and we're developing. But we've got the structure of being valued for wildfire. For the first time, I don't know about you, but the first time you did fire behaviour training, the first time you went in there and you got your BA, you did your Mod B, as we call it in the UK and other places, you suddenly realised, I think I'm a firefighter now, or I'm on that journey. I'm on that journey now. I'm taking the responsibilities that I've got to execute in my job. I'm stepping up to it. And this is the same thing. People now can be valued because they've got their vegetation fire operator. They've met the standard. They've been assessed. They've met that, and they're keeping their competency going. They're moving to being a professional in this area. So now we can value that. We can physically say, okay, you're an operator, great. I can use you. You're not an operator, okay, but you'll have to be under supervision, maybe under the operator, because that's got that skill set. And that's a lot of pride in humans. It goes back to the human element again. You can be valued. You're being valued, and you're actually contributing to that process. You have responsibility. You're beginning the journey to a bigger thing at the end of the day. It's been a humbling experience delivering that training. Andy's done a brilliant job. We've had some fantastic delegates coming through, lots of ladies coming through. Great to see that as well.
Yes, yes,
getting them with drip torches, getting them with rake hose, getting them out there with beaters and with sprayers and things like that.
Building confidence up, building the confidence.
Yeah, exactly. We've had researchers, we've had Guillermo, we've had Claire, we've had everybody's been coming doing the training, because you suddenly now we're all at the same standard. We can all have a conversation about the fire behaviour training that we've done together, and it's building that connectivity. It's about making change happen. And again, I emphasise the theme of this year's conference at Belfast is that thing, and we're having the ability to make that change with people. We're getting lots of interest from different parties. We've had lots of observers from the fire service coming along, so excellent feedback from them. Some of the people who trained me in the fire service have been observing me delivering training to them, which has been a fascinating experience. And we've had some great conversations. And the feedback is so important to us, because we're always evolving the training. We're always trying to improve it, make it better, bring on more instructors. People have said, oh, I would like to instruct this. I've been a professional instructor in my sector. Brilliant, that's great. Let's bring you up to speed. You've had international experience, or you've had unique experience in the UK. We want to get a diversity of sectors delivering the training. It's opened a new conversation, because now we've got a structure we can work from in prevention and also in response. And I think that's the really I'm really passionate about. How can we better connect prevention, response, and recovery? Those three things have got to happen together much more closely. And it means I have to give up some power. I have to share the things that I do to make that happen with colleagues. And similarly, they're going to have to do that as well, because we can't solve wildfire if we hold on to power. Even if we have a legal duty, we're going to have to share that out to be successful. That's the lesson I learned from Australia, that working with land managers, working side by side with the fire service, almost on the fire line in some cases where it's safe to do so. And you've got people who understand wildfire, and they can take that information back into the prevention or recovery phase and know exactly how they're going to deliver that mitigation, because they've seen the fire behaviour, they've seen the challenges, the landscapes, the vegetation, the infrastructure is proving, and they've got that memory in their heads of seeing that happening, and then they can go and build that adaptation and mitigation that's required. Such an important thing that land managers have to be part of that response journey in whatever's the most safe thing for them that they can do under the guidance of the Fire Rescue Service in the UK. They lead command for us. That's really important. They do that, and we're disciplined. We don't self-deploy. Discipline is the critical thing, and that's what we teach on our training, so that we can gain that vital experience, so we can build the recovery and build back better resilience into our environments. it's these things, these steps that we go through: preparedness, prevention, response, and recovery. As soon as we put barriers in one of them, like we take response out, say, well, you can't do that because you're not wearing the right uniform today and right badges. That's where it starts breaking down.
Yeah.
And that's a human thing. We as humans have made that decision. Nobody else, the environment hasn't done that. We need to connect these things together where it's safe to do so. And I will stress the word safe. And so that we get that experience, that knowledge. And now training is just that first step. It's doing it in a safe environment. It's all simulated fire on using straw. A lesson we learned from Paul Costas and our friends in South Africa.
Yes, I saw the images. So
a journey 10 years ago, not reinventing the world, we're just using good practice which works at the end of the day, and give people that kind of fire behavior experience. Get them to feel the heat on their face in a different way, in a way that they're absorbing information that they've probably done it. We've had guys who've been burning for 40 years, some of the country's best burners. They've come on the course and realised they've learned something extra. And we weren't teaching them to suck eggs, as an expression we use in the UK. We were saying that here's a new standard we are working to, and you're part of that journey. In fact, we're looking to you as our very experienced burners to lead this adaptation as we move forwards. People responded really well back to that. I'm very impressed with some of our land managers who could have poo-pooed this. They could have kind of like dismissed this as training, and they've taken it on in the spirit that they should have done. And I'm very impressed with gamekeepers, with foresters, conservationists and ecologists who've taken it in that spirit. And they've said, finally, we're getting the training that we wanted. Now I know what to do. Now I know what discipline is. I know who to work to, what I should be doing. And I'm beginning my journey. Well, the competency framework and task book allows them to carry on that learning in a structured way. So we're very excited by that. And it's as a system we use in the fire service. We have exactly the same systems. So we're just kind of helping people give these structures so they can be effective and efficient and safer. We want everyone to go home safely at the end of the day. That's the critical thing. We've all when I speak to firefighters and particularly and land managers, what's the worst thing that's ever happened to you? And it's invariably, I had to dive into a ditch because a wildfire was going over me. And that has come back to me so many times. People have said that thing. It wasn't the breathing apparatus incident, the structure fire incident, or the RTC, and although they are challenging, and I might not dismiss how difficult they are, having first-hand experience, but it was always the wildfire that nearly caught them out. And if we can skill people up so they're aware, they've got their laces, their lookouts, their awareness, communication, escape route, safety zones, they've got their other safe systems are working in place, then we'll hopefully save a life or two, and also improve our adaptation as we move forward. And the fact that we're now showing some land managers is very exciting.
Very inspiring words. There are very inspiring words, and your work down there at UK is very inspiring. And I'm sure those that are watching right now, they will be inspired as well, because you bring confidence, you upsurging confidence, and you're building resilience within the sector and outside of the sector, actually. So you're bringing all these groups together, and so that's of great significance. With regards to competencies, yes, back in 80s and 90s, there was, in the 2000s, there was this urge to get firefighters competent within the structural firefighting, obviously with the massive fire prevention campaigns that have been taken along, and of course the changes in the way we build our communities and our houses. The structural fires have diminished greatly, the numbers have diminished greatly, and that's a great thing. But I have been saying that for the last 10 years, that our greatest challenge will be wildfires. And we are back in the game still. But now we have a window of opportunity, as in wildfires. We have a window of opportunity to build that framework and build that training framework, and getting the fire authorities competent on how to deter this the incidents that will come and will challenge the fire rescue services across the world immensely. We've seen actually to UK that you have declared, I don't remember really the number of the major incidents declared in the London region that day.
Yeah. So across England, I think they declared 14 major incidents. In
14.
So that's quite phenomenal.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
In a single day. That's in a single day. 14 major incidents declared. So it makes you thinking of what's coming. So I absolutely agree with you, and your work, I think, will inspire so many more to join you. I'm pretty sure, and I will do my best to join you as well, to attend one of your courses. It will be great pleasure to train with you and exchanging ideas with you. It will be great pleasure, and I will put this in effect in the following weeks or months, because I think we need to build that community more, and we need to expand our endeavors with colleagues across the world. We have so many things to learn from each other, so many things to learn. It's so great that you're bringing people from all the grounds, land managers, firefighters. You bring both sexes, both men and women, to get the feel of the heat. It's, it goes back to the fundamentals. So we train people on fire safety, and we train people how to use a simple fire extinguisher, and we get these fire modules, how to face the fire and to feel the heat. It makes sense to use the fire extinguisher on a real fire. So with regards to wildfires, which is massively much more aggressive and much more bigger, we absolutely need to do this. We need to get our communities engaged. And
exactly. Yeah.
Do you think this will be legislative? So do you see this coming?
I mean, obviously, to extinguish fires as part of the Fire Rescue Services Act 2004 in the UK, and obviously the Civil Contingencies Act has duties and responsibilities for the Lead Government Department, which is the Home Office in the UK. So DEFRA isn't the Lead Government Department for wildfire; that is the Home Office. Wildfire specific, I think certainly the National Security Risk Register might reflect that very, very soon. Obviously, wildfire became a variation of major fire in 2019, whereas it was a separate incident type, and we worked on this in 2013 on the post-Olympic kind of work that we were doing. So I see wildfire coming back potentially as a separate hazard on the National Security Risk Register, and if that does, that'd be very useful. But specific legislation, I don't know. I don't know what the appetite for that would be. That's well outside of my view of the world. But what I do know is there's some excellent work going on across the UK, some excellent initiatives, as I've spoken about. We are learning all the time. We aren't going to stop. The word advisor is a very well chosen word. I'm not comfortable with the word expert for some people, because how can you know everything? You're still learning, and Mark has shown us that he's still learning, and he's done some excellent work because of that mind shift that he made. And I think if we can continue working with our European colleagues, our international colleagues in Canada, in North America, United States, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, and the rest of the world, because we are learning from the rest of the world, because there's massive lessons to learn from there, then we're going to be more resilient. But we then got to share that information. We have a duty to share information, whether it's through research papers or initiatives or projects that happen. So we just don't hold that power to ourselves. We've got to share it around. That's the critical thing as we move forward.
So we're just above 1 hour above time for now. And what is Rob's 3 main objectives for the next 6 months or a year?
Oh gosh, that's a big one. Well, I suppose I've got to get finished this national adaptation program work. That's critically important for me, because I'm so passionate about what the future is going to be and what legacy we leave behind, and how I can help other people get into this particular process. Continuation of the training and the evolution of the training, it won't stop. The curriculum will always hopefully improve and learn, and new modules will hopefully come forward very soon. We're working on those now. So that's, and to grow the instructor base with Andy Elliott, who's doing a cracking job. I mean, I can't emphasize what an inspiration it is working with him. And I suppose the last bit is, how do we help the wildfire sector in the UK grow, become and begin to mature and have more opportunities to engage, like I've had the privilege to. I mean, I've been very lucky in my career. How can I give other people those opportunities so that they can grow and find new ways of solving problems that maybe I don't have got a clue about? So I think that's a thing I'm taking forward and trying to create for a lot more people. And to meet some of the amazing people that you've spoken about, because they are truly inspirational, and they've certainly helped me in my career, no end.
Likewise, likewise. What do you expect from UK in the next year? Do you expect massive changes with regards to wildfires?
I think the UK, in terms of mitigation and adaptation, I see subtle changes, because that's how the UK works. We're not revolutionary by nature. We make subtle incremental steps and improvements, and that's what I'm hoping that we do, because that way we lay good foundations, solid foundations, which will survive. So I'm hoping that will happen. I'm hoping that we get rain this winter. I'm hoping we get a lot of rain this winter. Not too much for flooding, but enough to address the drought that we're in, to check the challenge. I've been on the prolonged dry period incident team now since 2017. This is the wildfires we're having now are the impact of many years worth of issues. So this isn't like an overnight thing. This has been many years in developing. But the problem, as Mark Costello has told us, is that the UK and Republic of Ireland, we have so much vegetation. We're such a fertile country in terms of vegetation. We've got massive fuel loading. And I look at my colleagues in Andalusia and Catalonia. I look at their fuel loading is very different from us in the UK. And I can remember sitting in a lift with the Home Office one day, and someone saying, "Well, it's raining now. Everything's sold." I went, "No, the fuel's growing. The fuel's growing." And it grew from 2012 when it started raining all the way up to 2016, 17, and that's what's burning now. And we've got to have. And I'm a forester. My job is to have a long-term vision. I plant trees for 70 or 120 years, and I've got to keep that in my mind all the time. What's the long-term impact of this? But after I'm gone, the trees that I've planted will be growing still, and hopefully adding benefit. But what am I going to leave behind to future generations or generations, so that they've got a chance to address these challenges in the 2080s, the 2021s and things like that? How do we address those kind of issues? We've got some interesting challenges to sort out well after we're long and gone. So let's hope we can make good foundations for them in the future.
You're an inspiring figure, dear Rob, and you have inspired me in so many ways today. I have enjoyed my discussion with you very much, and I'm sure those that are going to watch this discussion are going to enjoy it as much. I'm sure so many messages have been put out, and I'm hopeful that people will hear you more out, and I'm hopeful that many things that we have discussed today will be the new reality, and that we all learn from each other, and we can move forward into a more resilient world and communities for the sake of our lives and the lives of those going to come ahead us.
Well, thank you, my friend, for these opportunities for people. You're giving to people to talk, and thank you for your inspiration and leadership in doing that. So wish you all the best and look forward to seeing you.
Likewise. Thank you so much, Rob. Have a beautiful day. Bye.